When the Galactic Council sends xenobiologist Threx 9 to evaluate humanity's worthiness for advanced membership, he expects the standard display of military prowess and technological achievement. What he doesn't expect is to witness a 100-pound human female named Zara Vex casually dominate a Kravlian alpha predator with nothing but a pointed finger and a stern look. As Threx investigates this impossible feat, he uncovers something far more terrifying than any weapon in the galaxy: the inexplicable, physics-defying phenomenon humans call presence. Now, with the Council demanding answers and his own species' position in the hierarchy suddenly feeling precarious, Threx must decide whether to report the truth or bury the most dangerous secret in the universe: that humans don't just survive at the top of the food chain, they were born there. Listen, I've been doing this job for 17 cycles, and I thought I'd seen everything the galaxy had to offer. Warrior species that could bench press starships? Check. Telepathic collectives that could liquefy your brain with a stray thought? Double check. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day I watched a human female make a juvenile Kravlian death beast sit like a trained pup. My name's Threx 9, senior xenobiologist for the Galactic Council. And before you ask, yes, the 9 inches means I'm a clone. No, I don't want to talk about it. The point is, I was sent to Earth to conduct a standard evaluation. The humans had applied for Tier 2 membership, which meant proving they weren't complete idiots who'd accidentally blow up a solar system if we gave them the good hyperdrives. The assignment seemed routine: file some reports, watch them demonstrate their particle cannons, maybe sample some of that pizza substance they kept raving about, then head home. Easy paycheck. I should have known better when they assigned me an escort named Zara Vex. She showed up at the landing pad wearing what I'd later learn was called hiking gear, which apparently consisted of boots that looked like they'd survived 3 wars, pants with more pockets than my data slate had functions, and a jacket that had seen better centuries. Her hair was pulled back in some kind of tail configuration, and she had this smile that immediately made my secondary stomach clench. "You must be Threx," she said, extending a hand in that bizarre human greeting ritual where they try to crush your appendages. "I'm your guide for the planetary tour. Hope you like forests because we're going deep into the Cascadian wilderness." Forests? I consulted my itinerary on my data slate, frowning. The schedule indicates military demonstrations and technology showcases. "Oh, that's tomorrow." She grabbed my travel case like it weighed nothing, which was impressive considering it contained 70 pounds of scanning equipment. "Today you get to see what Earth's really about. Besides, the brass figured you'd want to evaluate our ecosystem integration. That's your specialty, right?" She wasn't wrong, but I was suspicious. Humans were notorious for playing games with council evaluators. Still, a forest survey would give me excellent baseline data for my report. If only I'd known that forest survey was human code for prepare to question everything you thought you understood about apex predators. The transport ride took us north to a region Zara called Oregon, where trees apparently grew tall enough to scrape the atmosphere and moss covered everything like a fuzzy green plague. It was beautiful in that terrifying way Earth specialized in, where every pretty flower was probably also venomous, and every cute animal could likely kill you 6 different ways. We hiked for about an hour, with Zara maintaining a constant stream of chatter about trail markers and bear safety, and something called ticks that made my exoskeleton itch just hearing about it. I was busy scanning a particularly interesting fungal colony when she suddenly stopped dead. Well, that's not good. I looked up to see what had prompted this reaction, and my threat assessment implant immediately started screaming alerts into my neural interface. Blocking the trail ahead was a creature roughly the size of a small shuttle, covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light, with 6 legs ending in claws that could shred through hull plating. Its head was all teeth and attitude, and those teeth were currently bared in our direction. Kravlian predator. I squeaked, diving behind Zara. Alpha class. "We need to retreat immediately and call for aerial extraction." "Relax," Zara said, not moving. "That's not a full-grown alpha. That's a cub." "A cub." I peeked around her shoulder. The cub was easily 300 pounds of murder lizard, and it was currently stalking toward us with what my implant identified as prey acquisition behavior. "We need weapons. Defense shields. Anything." "Nah, watch this." What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my unnatural cloned existence. The Kravlian Cub, emboldened by Zara's complete lack of appropriate fear response, lunged forward and bit down on her boot. Not a playful nibble, mind you. A full commit, trying to sever the foot kind of bite. Those jaws were designed to crack through bone and armor plating. Zara looked down at the creature attached to her footwear. She sighed. The way you might if you discovered a mild inconvenience like a shipping delay. Then she did something that defied every law of xenobehavioral psychology in the database. She pointed at the ground next to her. Just pointed. One finger, extended downward in a gesture that meant absolutely nothing in Kravlian body language. And she said, in a tone that was somehow both disappointed and matter-of-fact, "No bad, sit." The cub's eyes went wide. I'm not anthropomorphizing here, by the way. I have the scanner footage. Those predatory slits actually dilated, and something that looked suspiciously like confusion crossed its reptilian features. I said, sit, Zara repeated, adding a little more edge to her voice, still not yelling, just firm. The way a teacher might speak to a student who'd turned in homework late. The Kravlian released her boot, backed up 2 steps, and then ancestors helped me. It sat down on its haunches, exactly where she'd pointed. It also made a noise, a high-pitched whimpering sound that should not have been physically possible for a creature with a larynx designed to produce hunting roars. It sounded, for lack of a better term, apologetic. Good, Zara said, her voice softening. She reached into one of her infinite pockets and pulled out what looked like a strip of dried meat. Here. This is how we say hello. The cub crept forward, took the offering gently from her fingers, and then retreated a few feet to consume it while keeping those huge eyes fixed on her. I realized my jaw had been hanging open for approximately 30 seconds. I closed it, checked my scanner readings, confirmed they weren't glitching, and then opened it again. What? I finally managed. In the 7 spirals of the void did I just witness. Zara shrugged, brushing some dirt off her boot where the cub's saliva had left a mark. Command presence, pack dynamics? Honestly, I'm not totally sure. That's why we wanted you to see it. She glanced at me with that terrifying smile again. Humans are really good at making things understand that we're in charge. Always have been. It's kind of our thing. That's, I sputtered. My translator struggling to find words adequate to express my mental state. That's not possible. Kravlians are fear-based hierarchical predators. They only respond to superior force or pheromone dominance. You're a fraction of its size and producing 0 relevant chemical signals. There's no mechanism for. Yeah, about that. Zara started walking again, somehow even more disturbing, now that I knew what she was capable of. The cub followed at a respectful distance, occasionally glancing at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the forest. That's actually what we wanted to talk to the council about. Turns out humans might be really good at something you guys don't have a classification for yet. My data slate was filling up with notes, none of which made coherent sense. Which is, being scary without trying to be scary. She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather, but those words hit me like a plasma bolt to the processing unit. Because if humans could dominate predators through sheer force of personality, if they could impose hierarchical structures on alien species through nothing but gestures and tone, if they could make things sit and whine without any biological mechanism to explain it, then what else could they make sit? What else could they make whine? You're wondering if we can do this to sapiens, aren't you? Zara asked, reading my expression. I nodded slowly. Well, she said, pausing at a bend in the trail, that's a conversation for tomorrow. Right now, I need to make sure this little guy gets back to his pack before his mama comes looking for him. Trust me, you do not want to be here for that reunion. The cub, as if understanding every word, let out another pathetic whimper and started slinking back into the underbrush. Before it disappeared, it looked back at Zara one more time, and I swear on my genome, it looked grateful. The walk back to the transport was silent, except for the sound of my brain systematically dismantling and rebuilding everything I thought I knew about interspecies dynamics. Zara maintained her casual demeanor, occasionally pointing out some cool moss or a really neat bird, while I spiraled through about 17 different existential crises. By the time we reached the landing pad, I'd filled 3 separate data slates with observations, questions, and what I can only describe as the academic equivalent of screaming into the void. So Zara said, leaning against the transport as the sun started setting behind those impossible trees, "I'm guessing you want some answers before tomorrow's official demonstrations." "That would be appreciated, yes," I managed, trying to sound professional despite the fact that my worldview was currently resembling a shattered cargo container. "What I witnessed today contradicts approximately 47 peer-reviewed studies on Kravlian behavioral psychology." 47? That's it? She grinned. "Wait until you see the database we've compiled. When humans started making contact with other species, we noticed something weird. Animals, predators, even some of the supposedly untamable species other civilizations had written off as too dangerous. They all responded to us the same way that Cub did. That's impossible. There's no universal trigger for submission behavior across unrelated species. The biology doesn't support it. That's what your scientists kept saying too." She pulled out a tablet, much more primitive than my data slate, but apparently sufficient for human purposes. "But here's the thing. We don't think it's biological. We think it's something else, something that exists in the space between psychology and physics." She showed me footage, dozens of clips, hundreds. A human named Atlas, making a Vorgin warhound heel with a snap of his fingers. Another called Phoenix, stopping a charging Krelthan bull beast mid-rampage, with nothing but a sharp whistle and a hand gesture. A human child, couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old, calming a panicked Thessian voidhawk, just by speaking softly and maintaining eye contact. "We've been studying this for 5 years now," Zara continued, swiping through more examples. "Started calling it the dominance resonance effect, though honestly, that's just a fancy label for something we don't really understand. Best we can figure, humans evolved as persistence hunters and pack coordinators on a death world that made everything else in the galaxy look like a vacation resort. We got really good at projecting authority, because we had to. But projection requires a receiver," I protested, my scientific training kicking in despite my shock. "There has to be a mechanism. Pheromones, subsonic frequencies, electromagnetic fields, something." "We thought so too. Ran every test in the book." She pulled up another file, this one filled with graphs and charts that made my head hurt. Monitored human brain activity, measured every conceivable output signal, scanned for exotic particles, even checked for latent psychic abilities. Found exactly nothing that could explain it. Whatever humans are doing, it's not something current technology can detect. My primary heart was doing some interesting arrhythmic patterns. "You're telling me humans have an invisible, undetectable, scientifically inexplicable ability to dominate other species through sheer force of will? When you put it that way, it sounds way more ominous than it is." She pocketed her tablet. "Look, we're not mind controllers or space wizards or whatever paranoid scenario you're cooking up in that big brain of yours. We can't make sapients do anything they don't choose to do. It's more like we're really convincing, persuasive, good at reading social cues and responding appropriately. That cub didn't choose to sit, it just did." "Fair point." Zara's expression turned more serious. "Animals are different. With non-sapient predators, yeah, it works almost like magic. With sapient species, it's more complicated. We can influence, suggest, sometimes intimidate if we need to, but we can't override free will. That's a hard limit we've found." "You've tested this?" "Extensively, both in controlled environments and accidentally in the field." She looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd met her. "There have been incidents, diplomatic situations where a human negotiator got frustrated and accidentally made an alien ambassador feel threatened. Not through violence, just through presence. It caused some problems early on. That's part of why we're only now applying for Tier 2 membership. We needed time to make sure we could control this, train our people to be aware of it." I sat down on the transport's loading ramp, feeling suddenly exhausted. "The Council is going to lose their collective minds when I report this." "Yeah, probably." Zara sat next to me, maintaining a respectful distance.
"Ooh, that's why we're telling you first before tomorrow's show and tell."
"You seem like a reasonable guy. Threx, 9 clones worth of experience, right? You've seen enough weird stuff to maybe give us a fair hearing." I don't know if fair is the right word. I admitted. What you're describing is terrifying from a galactic security standpoint. If humans can dominate predators without technology or violence, if you can influence behavior through mechanisms we can't detect or counter, that makes you potentially the most dangerous species in known space. Or the most useful. She raised an eyebrow.
Think about it.
How many worlds in Council space have dangerous megafauna they can't safely coexist with? How many colonies fail because local predators can't be managed? How many exploration teams get wiped out by hostile wildlife? Now imagine having humans on those teams, humans who can make those predators back down without firing a shot. I hated that she had a point. The Council lost an average of 40 exploration teams per cycle to wildlife attacks. Colony establishment costs were astronomical, partly because of predator management infrastructure. And don't even get me started on the forbidden zones. Entire planets written off as too dangerous because the local fauna was simply too aggressive to handle. You're proposing humans as some kind of universal animal tamers? More like universal coordinators.
Pack leaders, whatever you want to call it.
She stood up, brushing off her pants. Look, tomorrow you're going to see our military tech, our industrial capacity, all the standard stuff. And yeah, we've got some impressive weapons and decent ships, but that's not what makes humans special. What makes us special is that we walked out of a planetary nightmare that killed 99% of everything that ever lived there, and we did it by learning to make things that should have eaten us decide we were in charge instead. The sun had fully set now, and Earth's single moon was rising over the tree line, painting everything in silver light. Somewhere in the distance, something howled, wild and primal and utterly unafraid. You know what the scariest part is? I said quietly. You don't even realize how terrifying this is. To you it's just normal. Maybe? Zara looked up at her moon, her expression unreadable. Or maybe we know exactly how scary it is, and we've spent the last few centuries trying to figure out how to be responsible with it. That's why we isolated ourselves for so long after first contact, why we've been so slow to integrate. We needed to understand this thing we could do before we went out into a galaxy full of potential, well, cubs. And you think you understand it now? Hell no, she laughed, sharp and genuine. But we understand ourselves better. We've got protocols, training programs, ethical guidelines. We've made mistakes, learned from them, built systems to prevent worse ones. That's all any species can do, right? Figure out what makes them dangerous and then choose to be careful with it. I wanted to argue, to point out that most species' dangers were at least comprehensible, measurable, something that could be planned for. But she was right about one thing. Every species in the Council had spent centuries learning to manage their own particular brand of threat. The Vorgens had their battle rage. The Thessians had their psychic volatility. My own species had the whole clone degradation thing that made us progressively more unstable with each generation. Everyone was dangerous, somehow. Humans were just dangerous in a way that made the hair on my sensory ridges stand on end. Tomorrow's demonstrations, I said finally. They're going to show more of this, aren't they? Not just more, better. Controlled environments, multiple species, full scientific documentation. Zara offered me a hand up, and I took it, noting how her grip was firm but not crushing, confident but not threatening. Even in a simple gesture, there was something there, something that made my hindbrain want to defer to her. We're ready to share everything we know, all our research, all our failures, full transparency. Because if we're going to join the Council properly, you guys need to know what you're getting. A species of apex predators who can make other apex predators sit and whine. Basically, yeah, she grinned. Also a species that really wants to use that for good. We've seen what happens when predators run unchecked. We lived it for millions of years. Now we want to help make sure nobody else has to. As we boarded the transport for the flight back to the human capital, I looked at my data slates, filled with observations and questions and disturbing implications. Tomorrow I'd see the official demonstrations, meet with human scientists, probably witness more impossible feats of behavioral domination. And then I'd have to write a report for the Council, a report that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed this strange species that had clawed its way up from a nightmare world by learning to make nightmares obey. The scary part? I was starting to think Zara was right. The galaxy needed humans, even if we didn't know it yet. Maybe especially because we didn't know it yet. "Hey Threx," Zara called from the pilot's seat as the engines hummed to life. "Thanks for not running away screaming when that cub bit my boot. Some evaluators have actually done that." "How many evaluators have you done this presentation for?" "You're the 9th. I snorted despite myself. "Of course I am. What happened to the other 8? Let's just say their reports were very enthusiastic about humanity's potential contributions to galactic peace." She glanced back with that terrifying smile. "Also, 3 of them asked for asylum on Earth. Apparently they decided they felt safer on the Death World with the predator-whispering apex species than back home." As the transport lifted off and Earth's lights spread out below us like captured stars, I considered that maybe those 3 evaluators weren't as crazy as they sounded. After all, in a galaxy full of dangers and unknowns, there was something oddly reassuring about being on the same side as the species that could make anything sit down and behave with nothing but a pointed finger and a stern look. Even if that species still terrified me right down to my cloned DNA. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more impossible demonstrations, and probably several more existential crises. But tonight, flying over a death world that had produced the galaxy's most inexplicable apex predators, I found myself doing something I hadn't expected. I was smiling. Because if humans could make a Kravlian death beast whimper and obey, maybe, just maybe, they could help make the rest of the galaxy a little bit safer too. Even if we'd all be sitting and whining by the time they were done with us.